Bedou, how am I saying this? Bedou? That is the best sound in the world. So, hi, I'm Matt. I'm the resident wine nerd here at More Natural Wine. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about three of my favorite topics: Pinot Noir, Burgundy, Frederic Cossard. Burgundy is the spiritual home of Pinot Noir. It's split into two halves of the Côte d'Or. The Côte de Nuit in the north is really the Pinot Noir country, is where most of the Pinot Noir is planted in Burgundy. And in the bottom half, or the southern half, is the Côte de Beaune, which is where most of your Chardonnay is planted, although there's exceptions to every rule. It is probably one of the most sought after and mysterious appellations in the wine world. Discussing soil in Burgundy is a Pandora's box. It's almost impossible to really understand fully the complexity of it. Côte d'Or lies on a geological fault, which over generations of geological epochs, you've got a mix and blend of limestones and marls from 20, 30, 40 million years ago, all sitting in a layered cake style underneath the topsoil in Burgundy. So I'm not even going to try. We're just going to taste wines and see what we can tell. Climate in Burgundy, you would consider cool to moderate, somewhat continental. Obviously, it's warmer in the southern parts than it is in the northern parts. It's quite elevated in most of the Côte d'Or. There's even higher sections which are designated to the Hautes-Cotes de Nuit and Hautes-Cotes de Beaune, which we'll talk about a bit more later when we're tasting the Hautes-Cotes de Beaune on the table. Land ownership in Burgundy is very convoluted. Thanks to Napoleon, land ownership has become a really complex spider's web of parentage and, what's the word I'm looking for? Inheritance. So basically the average plot ownership in Burgundy is around 7 hectares, which is quite small in comparison to everywhere else in the world. And most of these 7 hectares are spread across multiple plots in multiple communes. So again, I'm not going to try and untangle generations of family squabbles, but welcome to Burgundy when it comes to working all this stuff out. So Burgundy's been known to produce some of the most expensive wines in the world. Eye-watering bottle prices of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 per bottle is not unknown for this appellation. Why is that? Well, it's not a very large appellation. So you're talking probably about 70,000 to 80,000 hectares overall. And for the amount of wine that's produced, it is quite small. So you're talking about small holdings, but lots of demand. And of course, supply and demand rules the world. And if there is lots of demand for a certain wine, then those prices are going to skyrocket. You can kind of say that there's no cheap Burgundies in the world. I mean, there is cheap Burgundies in the world, but they're obviously not going to be very good. It is an appellation where you're literally paying for what you get. And this is very, very noticeable in the glass. Generally speaking, the appellation structure is your guide to price. The appellation structure in Burgundy is actually quite simple compared to the rest of France in certain places. It's copied the world over, and it's a very simple pyramid structure where you have a regional appellation, which is like a catch-all appellation at the bottom of the pyramid, a village or commune appellation in the center, and then you have your top tiers of Premier Cru and Grand Cru. This is your determination of not only quality levels, but also price. Premier Cru sector of the Appellation System is a little different to the rest of France in some areas. It can be split. It can be a blend from a Premier Cru commune, or it can be a single vineyard bottling. Grand Crus are not like that. A Grand Cru is strictly a single vineyard bottling, hence why they command such high prices. So a village wine is what they would call a commune wine or a communal wine. So it really is one, if you want to call it suburb or small parcel of an appellation. This is quite common within Burgundy and also outside of Burgundy. It really is I guess, smaller, more refined catch-all for a particular commune. It allows blending, but it also allows single vineyard or single plot bottlings. You are allowed to blend in a village wine, which of course this allows you to blend Premier Cru or Grand Cru fruit, but that's not really likely. So Frederic Cossard, I guess in the natural wine world and in the wine world in general, is considered a bit of a master. I know he's one of my favorite winemakers. He's definitely somebody that I look to for inspiration and someone I look to for general, if I need to remember what the top of the top tastes like, then Cossard's definitely someone I will go to. Unlike most winemakers in Burgundy, Frederic Cossard does not come from a winemaking family, which is unheard of in this region. He farms off 10 hectares of rented vineyard, which is, you know, considering how inheritance works in this region, very uncommon. Those farms are farmed organically with biodynamic treatments, nothing certified or nothing screamed about. He operates in a way which is singular to him. He farms all of these farms himself. He plows with a lone horse and a manual plow. It's a sight to be seen. Yeah, like I said, Frederic Cossard does not come from a winemaking family. He actually comes from a dairy farming background. So yeah, there are some people in the wine world, maybe at more natural wine, they'd call him the milkman. It's not me, I swear. So you called him the milkman. So Frederic operates as a domain, but also operates as a négociant. So he bottles his négociant fruit under the Frederic Cossard name, and then he has the Domaine de Chasseneuil for his domain holdings. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this way of working, basically the domain fruit is the land that he owns, rents, and farms. The négociant fruit is fruit that's brought in from other growers. But I mean, this might sound like it's some kind of, you know, he's accepting fruit from anyone or it's lower quality. This is absolutely not the case. He works very closely with all of the farmers that he works with. He even visits them regularly, helps them in the farm. Also tries to maybe not push techniques onto them, but offer tips wherever he can. This is also something very special to the way that he works. Being a négociant allows Frederic Cossard to experiment with lots of different grapes from lots of different areas that are generally close by. Recently we tasted a Sancerre Rosé, which he was sourcing fruit from, I believe, Auvergne and around Languedoc, which is, you know, super awesome. There's no other Burgundy producers doing this kind of thing. He's also working with lots of fruit coming from the Jura and neighbouring regions. And this is just a testament to the type of winemaking philosophy and the type of winemaker we're talking about here. Somewhat classic, but also with an experimental edge. So Cossard's philosophy when it comes to winemaking is all about time. And time is absolutely necessary to make the types of expressions that we're lucky enough to taste in every glass. Most of the reds in the Cossard portfolio spend 5 to 6 weeks maceration, so that includes a fermentation period, that includes malolactic conversion. And look, 5 to 6 weeks is a seriously long time. Normally in an open top fermenter, so you're getting exposure to oxygen. Following malolactic conversion, the grapes are pressed off their skins and put straight into barrel. I've never seen a Cossard bottling that's been under 12 months in barrel. I mean, obviously that doesn't count for some of the rosés that come out of the portfolio. The majority of the wines spend 12 months in barrel and then are either matured for longer or put straight into bottle. All of Cossard's vinifications are done without any addition of sulfur dioxide. Now, for the majority of the wine world, doing more than 12 months maturation without any sulfur dioxide is going to be a little bit of a struggle, but there's always a question of how. There's always a little bit of a mystery as to how it is done in this way, and namely because of hygiene in the winery. Coming from the dairy world, this gave Frederic the advantage of understanding how important hygiene is, and it should be the #1 priority for every winemaker in the world, not only natural winemakers, but I think it's more of an emphasis in the natural wine world because we have no protection, basically. We have no protection from oxygen, we have no protection from microbiological spoilage, no protection from spoilage yeasts. We are under attack at all times, so hygiene is your #1 friend. Cossard cleans all of his barrels with ozone and not sulfur dioxide, and this is something which is quite common now in the wine world, but also not as common as we would like. So not really subjecting to sulfur dioxide at any point. We still demand the highest level of hygiene and cleanliness, and that comes out in the wines. I've never smelled anything funky in a Cossard wine, and that's the #1 reason. Sometimes I've been known to use the terroir word a little bit too often, and it gets thrown around in the wine world, especially in the natural wine world, a little too much, in my opinion. But I will say it when I'm talking about Frederic Cossard wines, because they are pure terroir wines. Now, terroir means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and you know, there is no definition for it, so what it means to you is different to what it means to me. But I think the prime example of what pure terroir wines are is a Cossard bottling. It is not only about soil, it is about a sense of place, and that's everything. That's soil, that's climate, that's elevation, but it's also a cultural aspect. There's people, there's history, and there's just more to it than rocks and soil, as much as I love rocks. Oh yeah. So the first bottle we'll be tasting today is the 2019 Beaune, and this is Frederic Cossard's Bourgogne Rouge, so his regional bottling. It is a négociant bottling, so it's not domain-owned fruit. It is bought-in fruit from a number of plots around Volnay and Pommard that are all, on average, around 40 years old. It does include one parcel of 50-year-old vines from Louis-Saint-Georges, according to reports, but of course, this may be a little bit of one of those wine world mysteries we'll never really know. A little, yeah. I think that's a little bit of bullshit. But anyway, whatever. But it doesn't come from the domain, so this has come from like someone trying to sell bottles of wine, yeah. Generally speaking, your regional bottlings, your Bourgogne Rouge bottlings are your lighter, more delicate expressions. You know, this doesn't necessarily need to come out in color, but it sometimes does. So just having a look at this, to be honest, it does have some quite intense color for a Bourgogne Rouge, which is a good sign for some people. I don't pay too much attention to that personally, but it can be. So what's it like on the nose? Tell you what, it's the best Bourgogne Rouge I've smelled in a while. Yes, it's delicate, but it's also quite pure. Very much those lovely red fruits, your raspberries, your strawberries, very fresh, very crunchy. Nothing really getting in the way of the fruit. It's quite clear, it's quite defined. Whereas normally, I guess, if you want to give it a little bit of a stereotype, your Bourgogne Rouge bottlings can be a little bit like a mess. They can feel a bit muddy, but this really doesn't. This really actually feels more on a village level, which is not uncommon for Burgundy. You have village wines that outperform Premier Cru, you have Premier Crus that outperform Grand Crus. This is quite normal. There's a distinct earthiness coming out in the glass as well, but that is common really, this, I guess, minerality of Burgundy, and it really does come from these marls and limestones, and you know, you don't want to get too ideological about it, but there is something there, yeah? Yeah, it's delicate, it's light, doesn't have that really deep tannic structure, so maybe not the best wine to have with your main. Light enough, for me personally, light enough to enjoy with a lighter starter, no doubt, but just a really lovely wine to drink. Delicate, fruity, but really quite pure and defined. I tell you, if you blinded me this, I would definitely upgrade its quality level. I would definitely say we're in a Premier Cru. I may even say it's a Hautes-Cotes village. Yeah, maybe not a Premier Cru, but definitely like a Hautes-Cotes village for sure. Lovely, delicate purity. It's not very noticeable, but there is a little bit of a fine little bit of grip there. I wouldn't call it sandy tannin or anything like that, but just that little bit of grip, just to let you know it's there, that little bit of personality. Constant energy. It doesn't scream and shout. It's not flabby. It just has a very consistent level of energy, which is really quite delightful. Like you would have no problem sinking this bottle at all. It's quite extraordinary for what it is, and the price to quality ratio is quite extraordinary, really. The problem that we have here is that we're going up a level every time. So it's really one of those things when you're tasting, you're like, I don't want to say too many good things about this bottle because the next bottle is going to be sick. So I've got to like save some superlatives, but let's roll. All right, next up, a domain bottling. So this is domain owned fruit. This is a Hautes-Cotes de Beaune. This is from obviously one of the domain owned parcels. Now I need to see the name because my French sucks, and if I pronounce it wrong, I'll probably have a few people going for my head. So it's the Puy de Chaux. This is the 2018 vintage. I've obviously tasted a few Hautes-Cotes de Beaune in my life and a few Hautes-Cotes de Nuit as well. So I'm interested to see how the master does it, because normally they can be just the afterthought of many domains. This seems like quite a priority, so I'm excited. That is the best sound in the world. All right, so what's the deal with this bottling? Well, this is a slope in the Hautes-Cotes de Beaune, so in the southern part of the Côte d'Or. It's about between 280 and 450 meters above sea level, generally speaking. In most of the parts of this plot is west facing, which is quite important for vineyards which are a touch elevated, especially in Burgundy, because it is quite generally cool or moderate in temperature. The west facing slope means you get the afternoon sun, so this allows these grapes to ripen a little bit more under more intense heat, which should in the glass mean a little bit more density of fruit. But generally speaking, all of the Hautes-Cotes bottlings have a little bit more of a lift, so a little bit higher acidity generally speaking, and that little bit of lift in their expression, because it is quite cool, this allows acidities to hang around. But I'm quite excited because this is a west facing plot. Ooh, yeah, it looks quite dark. Normally, again, you would think a Hautes-Cotes bottling will be quite light in color, but this does have some color intensity, which is very promising. Holy shit. So yeah, a little bit about the winemaking of this wine. This is actually fermented in a 1700 litre concrete egg. I believe this is the only concrete egg fermentation in the Cossard winery, but I could be wrong. Following the fermentation, you get 1 year in barrel and then it is bottled. So straight off the bat, we're outside of the crunchy freshness and a bit more ripe, a bit softer in your, say, raspberry or strawberry, even cherry, a bit softer cherry. Maybe you've left it for too long and it's gotten a bit soft and it's a little bit overripe, but it's still juicy and still really enticing. So 2018 was a warm vintage, by all reports. I wasn't there. It's true, it was warm. Apparently, yeah. So generally speaking, a warm vintage means riper fruit flavors. I'm getting a little bit of that, but nothing over the top. Nothing jammy or cooked or anything like that. And again, a little bit of that earthiness is here with not more intensity, but a bit more of a lift to it. And that's quite common for this area of Burgundy. I'm definitely getting a bit more of that barrel aging quality coming out in this wine. A little bit of, I guess, charred wood, a little bit of chocolate, not over the top. It's very understated and it's very well done. There's nothing about this wine that's over the top. There's nothing about this wine that's screaming, shouting, or kicking the doors down. It is a wine that what I would describe is in the pocket. Woo! It's got brightness, it's got power, but not a broad-shouldered kind of power, a much more direct, very fast-paced is what I would call this. The travel down your palate is extremely quick. That doesn't mean to say it's a short wine, but it travels, and it travels at serious velocity. That's because of that brightness of acidity. It really lights up your palate. It really does have that, you know, stereotypical Hautes-Cotes lift. But underneath that lift, you have a really beautiful, dense layer of those overripe raspberries, overripe cherries. Yeah, it's remarkable. It really does have so much more complexity than wines that are bottled from this area normally, in my opinion anyway. The one quality of this wine that's, I guess, different to your Bourgogne Rouge bottling is that there's a little bit more, how do I put this without sounding like a serious wanker? There's a little bit more mystery about this bottle. about this glass and about this wine, there's this, I guess the image that I always get when I'm coming towards these areas of these levels of quality of wines in Burgundy is that image of like a dark forest, forest in winter kind of thing going on. So it's mysterious, but it's also a little bit scary. But I mean, I'm not scared. I'll go back to you, I promise. Yeah, and I think it's that, I guess, dark spice and charry wood thing going on. It's like you've just put out a campfire and there's dampness around from an autumn evening or a winter evening or something like that. It really is one of these things where you put your nose in a glass and you're immediately there, which is why blind tasting Pinot Noir from Burgundy can be not easy, but you know where you are straight away, but then you have to try and dissect exactly where. So you're immediately in Burgundy and you're immediately at Pinot Noir, but then to try and dissect actually where in Burgundy you are is the hardest thing in the world, but you'll get there easily. You just won't know where to go. Yeah, that's sick. Last note on this wine would be the tannic structure. It's not intense, but it reminds you it's there. It's like a tingling on the tongue, really fine grained, really fine chalk kind of sensation, but that tingle continues down your palate. So you've got this roaring energy, but then you've got these little tingles just to let you know that it hasn't gone anywhere. And this really extends the finish a lot, I feel. Normally, tannins on the finish can be a little bit bitter, a little bit sour, somewhat off-putting, but this is the complete opposite. This allows that tannic structure allows this wine to continue to deliver awesome for a long, long time. All right, we're gonna get serious now. Even though it's a village wine, yeah, we've got to get a bit serious. We've got the most serious bottle of the three. This is also a Négoce bottle, but it's definitely not going to be a Négoce bottle in flavor and in purity, in my opinion, or I would think. Let's go through a little bit of what this wine's about. So this is a Frederic Cossard bottling because it is Négoce. It is a Morey-Saint-Denis, and let me get the name right because again, I don't want French people looking to kill me. This is the Les Champs de la Vigne 2017. Yeah, Morey-Saint-Denis, generally speaking, is known to produce quite powerful wines, very ageable wines, normally quite broad-shouldered, a little bit of dense tannin that normally allow it to have quite a long life. The most special thing about this bottling is that it is a vineyard plot right next door to one of Fred's most loved Premier Cru plots, farmed by the same farmer, and that plot is, let me check my cheat sheet, Le Mont Louisin. This is the Premier Cru Frederic Cossard Morey-Saint-Denis bottling. And this is the neighboring vineyard to that. These are 50 to 60-year-old vines, somewhere in between that. And it's planted with one of the rarest Pinot Noir clones, the Pinot Fin, depending where you come from. Or if you're Australian, Pinot Fin. Sorry. So the Pinot Fin is the... Keep a straight face, trying to sound French. Aussies trying to sound French, good luck. No, so the Pinot Fin is one of the, I guess, rarest clones of Pinot Noirs. Not much known about it, and there's not too many vignerons that are still planting this clone. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is Albert Bichot, but you know, I would have to look into it to try and find more about it, but yeah, it is definitely rare. Unlike the other bottlings of the three of the wines we've tasted, this is actually has its maturation or its élevage in Georgian kveveries. Fred actually went to Georgia and sourced these kveveries himself. So these are buried as well. These are buried kveveries. So this should offer quite an interesting play on that broad-shouldered, quite tannic, typical Morey-Saint-Denis thing, and that kind of élevage. This is quite different for Burgundy overall. This never happens. So yeah, we're in store for quite an interesting wine. If I was gonna have a little bit of a idea of what to expect here, I would expect some pretty dense fruit, some pretty hectic tannins, and yeah, a little bit of minerality as well. So let's have a little bit of a taste. Strangely, this is definitely the lightest intensity in terms of color, but it is the oldest of the wines we've tasted. It's a 2017 vintage. Of course, red wines, unlike white wines, they actually lose pigmentation as they age. And this definitely has a little bit of aging signs based on the color. The rim of the color is definitely turning a little bit brick, a little bit orangey. Yeah, definitely more brick. So there are signs, without a doubt, of bottle aging here. A really, really intense nose, not jumping out of the glass, but very, very, very intense. And yeah, those tertiary characters, those ageable characters are definitely there. They are the first real note that I get to, and that's because of that high level of earthiness. And this earthiness is really developed into that forest floor, that really pure, typical descriptor of that forest floor without a shadow of a doubt. That's why the fruit seems a little bit more overripe now, a little bit dried rather than fresh. There is an element of fresh fruit still here, but it's more on that sour cherry note, dried raspberry, but the density's definitely there, and it's really heavily concentrated, and you can almost feel that level of power. It reminds me actually, again, this might be a little bit wanker, but it reminds me actually of one of these older style pomades. By older style, I mean kind of old school winemaking style pomades. A little bit of dark spice on here as well, a bit of clove. Yeah, more like a cinnamon stick, like a freshly cracked cinnamon stick. You get that woody, barky kind of character to it. But I always go back to this mysterious, foresty kind of image. Look, I can already tell that the quality of the wine is going to be extremely high, because it's been a good few minutes and I'm not even thinking about tasting it yet. I still want to keep going back and smelling more and finding out more. Whoa. I think powerful would be understating this wine to some degree. It's strong, but it's not overpowering. It has that element of richness, but not over the top. I guess sometimes people associate richness with like a really over-extracted Cabernet or something like that. This does not have those qualities at all. It is a very, very powerful wine. It has so much concentration and so much complexity. You've got red fruits, there's also a hint of dark fruit on the palate. These kind of black berries, black cherries. It's much more black cherry on the palate than that dried red cherry I was getting on the nose. I get the same level of energy and excitement as I would from a Premier Cru. Again, this is a wine which would be categorized as a village wine, but it outperforms and punches way above its weight without a shadow of a doubt. Almost like some leathery, tobacco-y kind of action. It's like you just walked into one of these speakeasies with leather couches and everyone's smoking loads of cigars. That's basically where I'm at now. I've just come back from the forest and I've gone to the speakeasy. It's pretty much my style. It's an absolutely wonderful expression of Pinot Noir from the Côte de Nuit. It is a beautiful thing to smell and taste. It is something that is the reason bottles like this, glasses like this, are the reason you keep going back to Burgundy and you keep going back to the masters of Burgundy. I once heard someone say, I won't name who, that said that Burgundy's it's like playing Russian roulette. You have to wade through so many shit bottles until you find a diamond, but the diamond makes you keep wanting to go back and taste those 20 shit bottles you just had, just so you can find another one. And it's very true. This is exactly the reason why we keep going back. We're gluttons for punishment, but when the punishment's this good, I'll take it. So let's talk money. No one really likes talking money, but it's always good to wrap with what kind of price point we're looking at for the wines that we're tasting. There's no cheap wines in Burgundy, they say, and look, I'm not gonna lie, these aren't the cheapest bottles in the world. The Bourgogne Rouge de Bordeaux comes in at a 36 euros, which is, to be honest, quite typical for that level of wine. But again, it really punches above its weight, so you're getting bang for your buck without a doubt. The Hautes-Cotes is a little bit more expensive. It is a domain bottling after all, so we're looking at 44 euros for this bottle, but you really do get that step up. The Morey-Saint-Denis, as you possibly imagine, is a sought-after appellation, so you're looking at 92 euros for this bottle, but really it is an experience that you should have. It is, I guess, a special occasion wine, if you want to call it that, really perfect for dinners with friends. You want people around, you want to share this with people, and you want quite a hefty meal to go with it. For me, a roast duck would be absolutely perfect with something of this density, maybe even lamb. Traditionally in Burgundy, your roast chicken is the way to go here, but yeah, I'd stick to duck myself. Cossard, Cozzy, Cosman, Freddie C, the man, big dog. Wait, let me do